Right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Teaching, Training and Education sector update today. My name is Sarah James, and I am the sector manager at Pearson for employability and also education and training. So the education training sector takes up half of my portfolio. In terms of what we're going to go through today, it's actually a fairly simple outline. So we're going to start by introducing ourselves. I'm then going to update you as far as I'm able to on the sector Trailblazer apprenticeship developments. I will then go through the status of the qualifications and what's going on with each individual qualification, because I realise that quite a lot of them have got dates that are expiring, or at least appear to be, even if that's not actually the case. And then finally, I'll take questions. My plan for today, just to let you know, this is a relatively short session. So what I intend to do is I intend to answer questions at the end of the session. You are quite welcome to type in the questions as we get any questions you have as you go along, because you may want to do that so that you don't forget them, and so that they're on my radar, which is really useful. But I intend to actually go through and answer individual questions at the end. But I will go through and answer every single one that's set, assuming that I have the answer, of course. Okay, so in terms of what we're going to do this afternoon, I think it's a bit of a strange time in a way for the education and training sector, because in one way it's a time of really significant change. So we've got a lot coming up that we need to talk about. So we've got introduction of new Trailblazer apprenticeship standards to cover much of the existing provision. However, as a whole, the sector in a way is a little bit behind others, because while we've got quite a large number of apprenticeship standards that are actually in development, or that are probably very close actually to sign off, we're still waiting on that to happen. And so while I can bring you up to date with everything I know in relation to the developments, I think that there is a limit to the level of detail that I'm able to give at this time. We've also got review dates in the next 12 months of a lot of the key provision in this area, which I will do my best to update you on where we are with that and what the current thinking is. And I think as well, it's a really important time for the education and training sector, because increasingly this suite is actually going to support the whole of apprenticeship delivery, potentially by employers as well as in the traditional FE training provider market, which means I also think that it's an exciting time, and it's a time where we should be anticipating quite a bit of growth over the next few years. So in terms of sector Trailblazer apprenticeship standards, so in summary, this is what we've got so far. So there are standards in development or proposed for teaching assistants level 2 and 3, education and training levels 3, 4 and 5, learning and development level 3 and 5, business manager director level 4 and 6, careers guidance level 6, and a graduate teacher apprenticeship that's also at level 6. And in terms of how do the new apprenticeships work? So apologies to people who are very familiar with this already, but from talking to customers, I find that the level of understanding varies. So in terms of the new apprenticeship standards that are in development in this sector and others, in the future there are basically 3 parts to them. So the first part is when the learner is actually working towards the relevant standard, and that's when they're being developed. It's when the employer and providers and trainers will be working with them to upskill them in that area so that they're able to achieve competence. We then, as a second part, have the gateway. Now basically this is where the employer decides that the learner is at the right level to undertake the endpoint assessment. So in other words, in their opinion, the learner is competent and is ready to go ahead and do that. The endpoint, then finally, at the end, the learner is assessed through the endpoint assessment, which is where the learner takes a synoptic assessment to demonstrate competence, and they do that at the end of the course, which is different to how it is at the moment. So, in terms of what is different to SACE, well, SACE in a lot of ways was a funding stream that included qualifications. Qualifications aren't actually compulsory in a lot of Trailblazer standards. In fact, probably most Trailblazer standards, qualifications are not compulsory in. The content of SACE was devised by the Sector Skills Council, whereas the new standards are devised by employers, and they're the drivers behind them. As I've already kind of mentioned, the assessment of competence is through endpoint assessment, and any formative assessment during the programme where the employer is deciding whether the learner's competent, whether they're ready to go on to Gateway, can't be used to contribute to the final judgment as to whether the learner has passed or not. Whereas obviously that's completely different to the current standards, where the assessment is kind of ongoing in an NVQ type approach, where learners are signed off against each criteria as they go on. So that's a very, very brief summary of how the new apprenticeship standards work. So I will move on to going through the individual standards one by one. So the first ones that to mention are education and training and learning and development. So in terms of education and training, 3 apprenticeship standards have been approved but are not yet ready to deliver. So they are FE Learning Mentor, FE Assessor Coach, FE Learning and Skills Teacher at between the levels of 3 to 5. In terms of qualifications, all of these have a mandatory safeguarding qualification, which we have under development, and the level 5 standard also includes as mandatory the diploma in education and training qualification at level 5. Just a little bit of information. I don't know if you are keeping your eye out on the apprenticeship consultations, because actually this month and at the moment, the FE Learning Mentor and FE Assessor Coach assessment plans have actually come out for consultation. So it might be useful, if you're interested in these, to go into that part of the government gov.uk website, download the standards and actually feed back on what you think about the about those proposals. If nothing else, it actually gives you the opportunity to see what's been published, which in itself is quite useful. Learning and development, as it says, there are 2 apprenticeship standards that have been approved for development but have not yet been approved and published, and that's learning development practitioner at level 3 and learning development consultant at level 5. Okay, so as I was saying, the learning development practitioner and consultant standards and assessment plans are both out for consultation on the .gov.uk website. And so again, if you're interested, you can go in and read those and feedback on what you think. I imagine they must be fairly confident that the standards are going to be approved this time. They look a lot better to me, to be honest, than they did when they last came out, and I fed that back already. But the assessment plans are also out for consultation, so they're obviously hoping that they'll be able to get those into place fairly quickly. So that's education, training and learning and development. I think both of these are going to be really key apprenticeship frameworks for supporting employers in their delivery of apprenticeships in general. I think there will be some overlap if I'm absolutely honest, but I think they do at the same time have their own fairly distinct usage, particularly the learning and development consultant, which is more around the kind of planning of training at organisational level, whereas the practitioner is more about being a trainer. So in terms of teaching assistant standards, and I remember from the polls that quite a few of you, or most of you, are delivering teaching assistant SACE at the moment. One standard has been approved but is not yet ready for delivery, and that's teaching assistant level 3. And what is going on with this at the moment is basically they have chosen that they want Ofqual to do their quality assurance, and so in order for that to be agreed, they need to agree their assessment plan with Ofqual before it actually goes out for consultation. And so they're in the process of discussing it with Ofqual and making a few changes, and hopefully that will be out for consultation in October or November. And so I would hope that this standard will be available fairly soon in the new year, although this is, I think it's impossible to guarantee, because some seem to come out quickly and some take ages, and I think a lot of them at the moment are taking quite a long time. In addition to that, the Trailblazer group are also starting the development of a level 2 teaching assistant standard, but I think initially they are prioritising getting that assessment plan through, and the other one hasn't moved that much as yet. And then in terms of other standards in the sector, there's been approval given for standards in School Business Manager Director, which these have been out for consultation. The Director one looks fairly niche to me. It's one of those things that it's quite lengthy. It's a full degree program, so I think that will have its challenges in a way to get employers to really buy into developing people in over that kind of period of time. Careers guidance has been given to approval's been given to an employer group to develop a level 6 standard for careers guidance professionals. I haven't read it yet. I suspect this will be a shorter standard and more of a postgraduate type program than a full degree type course. And the same is true. The same is true for teaching. So there is going to be a teacher apprentice for people who are already graduates. And I think there have been a couple of other ones that have been announced recently. So there's now talk about having a full teaching degree apprenticeship, which I think is an interesting undertaking. There has also been discussion, and an expression of interest is being put in by an employer group in employment related services. So that's for people who are working advising people on career options at a lower level than careers guidance, and are working with unemployed people and potentially people with colleges. We have asked them to keep it as broad as possible so that it potentially takes in the advice and guidance space as well, but we are still waiting for that to happen, to actually see anything in terms of we're waiting to actually see something that's final for that. Okay, so that's what's going on in terms of apprenticeships in the sector. So the next thing is I want to go through what's going on with each of the individual qualifications. So qualifications are currently under review to ensure that they are fit for purpose for the future. And I think a lot of this is around the current change that we've already talked about. And so In some cases, qualifications will change or be withdrawn, and in some cases, further guidance will be given. Some of the others will be extended. So in terms of the kind of overarching headlines for qualifications, is the qualifications that we have that are in existing SACE frameworks are being extended, and they're all being extended for now, so that there is no gap in provision. We are extending our level 2 peer mentoring and education awards to 2021. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those in a minute, because they're actually really good qualifications that I think a lot of people aren't actually aware of, but they really are growing in popularity at the moment. And we also have, as I've already said, a safeguarding qualification in development. Okay, so if I start with advice and guidance, we are intending to withdraw our advice and guidance qualifications, and the final date for entry will be the 30th of April 2018. There will be a formal communication going out to centres about that, I'm hoping in the next week. Now, the reason for that, I don't know if I've got anybody here who delivers advice and guidance. The reason for that is that these qualifications are quite old. We're concerned that they aren't really fit for purpose anymore fully, and the registrations on them have fallen, and so we don't have a business case really to redevelop something new that will be fit for purpose in the future. However, as I said, I'm hoping that this will be covered in the future by the Trailblazer development that's relating to employment-related services. Careers guidance, I will be communicating a decision in relation to that shortly. We haven't actually finally decided what to do with careers guidance. In terms of education and training, so this is AET, CET, DET. So the AET and CET qualifications are being extended to the end of July 2018, while a review takes place to ensure fitness for purpose. Now, my gut feeling with these is that probably they will be extended, if not as they are, but pretty much as they are from further on from that date. I'm not expecting any change that's made to these to be significant at all. And I'm just in case anyone was wondering, there are a lot of qualifications that finish at the moment at the end of this year, and it's not just because I haven't got around to extending them. Basically, I'm waiting for a lot of them to have a very minor amendment made internally at Pearson. And it really is minor. It's something that you aren't going to notice. Okay, it's not. There's, but it's meaning that it's just delaying some of these extensions that I would very much have liked to have made. I'm ready to make, but I'm just waiting on this tiny bit of work to be done on them. And the team have got a very big list to go through, and so that's why they've been held up a little bit. The DET, so that's the Diploma in Education and Training review date, is already the 31st of July 2018, so we've already extended that one to then. And again, a review is being carried out to ensure that this qualification is also fit for purpose in the future. I am expecting that there will be some change to this qualification. There are a few changes in relation to what's expected of FE teachers, in relation to curriculum and so on, since these were written, and as a result of that, there is some additional content that probably is needed. By the way, if anybody would like to feed into that review and into that consultation, then if you let me know at the end, then that would be great. So, peer education and mentoring. We actually have two level 2 qualifications in peer education and peer mentoring, and they're designed to be used with a variety of learners actually. One way that they're used is in in one particular organisation is with young people who volunteer with them, and they're used as a way of recording the skills that they're developing as they train each other up. I do think that with the requirement for employers to train apprentices, that peer education and peer mentoring is actually going to become increasingly important, and so these are likely to be quite a useful introductory qualification for people to use. Interestingly, out of the centres I've got that use these, people really rate them, and they feel very passionately about how good these are and how useful they are to their learners. So just telling you about them really. However, we have withdrawn the certificate size qualifications, so it will be the award sized only that are available in that suite moving forward. So assessor and verifier qualifications. I would just like to make clear that when I say the current proposal is that all of the qualifications are extended to 2020, that it is a proposal, okay? And I think it's what is most likely to happen. However, this hasn't yet been confirmed or agreed, so you will need to keep your eye on communications in relation to these over the next few months. But the plan is rather than entirely redeveloping at this point, that instead we're going to put guidance together on exactly how to best use these qualifications to support Trailblazer, apprenticeship, and other non-accredited assessment. Because what we've decided not to do is, as a kind of real knee-jerk reaction to new requirements, to put together qualifications to support that wouldn't necessarily be accepted by providers and other awarding organisations and so on. We very much tried to stick with the old assessor and verifier qualification. Well, the kind of, by old I mean existing and well-known assessor and verifier qualifications that people understand and will expect their assessors to have. I think the current position, and having discussed this with the Education and Training Foundation, is that we actually need more experience of the new apprenticeship standards and for more of them to be in place for us to actually know what's needed exactly in the future here. However, quite simply, the basic principles of assessment haven't changed, and they still remain the same in apprenticeships as they were in, or they are in, NVQs or technical certificates or the qualifications that make up the current frameworks. And so, as far as we're concerned, we still really do believe that the qualifications are fit for purpose to develop the skills that are required by different types of assessors. We just need to be clear that that centres understand and people like providers understand what qualifications are likely to be suitable for which roles. I think it's interesting because I think the indications are increasingly that the assessor qualifications will still be needed, and actually potentially I think will expand in the future, which obviously is good news for you if you are delivering those. I think that the reason for that is that there is a level 4 apprenticeship in assessor coach, which in a way covers this space. However, talking to employers, when you start talking about the idea that they would go through 3 months, you know, with perhaps putting somebody through an assessor qualification and then they're ready to go, and then all of a sudden looking at an apprenticeship, they might be looking at 12 to 18 months. I'm very much getting feedback that employers are going to really struggle with that as a concept, because obviously if they need somebody to assess, they need them to do it now. They don't need somebody to do it next year. And so the feedback generally is that basically the assessor coach apprenticeship may well actually be used as a kind of professional development for people who are already qualified. And I think as well, we really are very concerned about transferability between different assessor roles and acceptability between awarding organisations. So if we start going off and developing qualifications in endpoint assessment, for example, or gateway, or whatever it might be, there's a real risk that other awarding organisations are going to go, hang on a minute, that isn't the agreed kind of blueprint proper assessor and verifier qualification that are agreed across the awarding bodies as being acceptable. So what is that? And I think I'd be very, very worried about giving somebody a qualification that didn't fit and there wasn't agreement for acceptability between different awarding bodies, and also transferability between the different roles potentially. Okay, so just to be clear, they're the qualifications that I was talking about in relation to the assessor and verifier qualifications. So, and then in terms of SACE, in terms of the qualification that are in the SACE apprenticeships, these have all been extended, and these, or we have agreement to extend them all. And these extensions are detailed below. So learning and development, a 12-month extension has been agreed while the Trailblazer standards are developed and finalised, and that includes both the level 3 certificate in learning and development and also the level 4 diploma in learning and development. Employment related services, we have agreed a 24-month extension that we will be processing to that qualification. That is the Pearson BTEC level 3 diploma in employment related services. The award and certificate qualifications, however, have been withdrawn, and they will not exist any longer. And the reason for that is because they're not included in the SACE apprenticeship framework, and as a result, we found that the registrations for those have really gone down. So we've decided to just offer the diploma from now on, or from the 31st of December 2017. So in terms then of supporting teaching and learning, so the level 2, so the teaching assistant qualifications, we are going to extend for 12 months as they are. So that's the level 2 certificate in supporting teaching and learning in schools, and the level 3 diploma in specialist support for teaching and learning in schools. I think we're getting to the stage with these where they've been around for a while and we do need to have a look at them. However, I really do feel that, or we feel that it's a bad idea for us to redevelop these before the level 2 teaching assistant standards have been written, because quite obviously in the future the level 2 qualification is going to need to be aligned with those Trailblazer standards, and so we have decided to, as a result, to extend these for 12 months. I think these are interesting qualifications because while they're not going to be compulsory in the new apprenticeship standards, I don't think that teaching assistants will ever be entirely delivered through apprenticeships anyway, for a variety of different reasons. So I think there will continue to be a need for those qualifications moving forward. And we've also extended the others that sit alongside them. So we've extended the Level 2 award in support work in schools, Level 2 certificate in supporting teaching and learning in schools, Level 3 award in supporting teaching and learning in schools, and the Pearson Edexcel Level 3 certificate in supporting teaching and learning in schools. And as I said, we have a qualification under develop, which is Pearson BTEC Level 2 award for safeguarding in a learning environment, which is designed to fit with the new apprenticeship standards. And it will be approximately 20 guided learning hours and will include the content required for education and training apprenticeship standards. And I'm hoping that we will have a specification for that to share with you before too long. That although we will need to develop assessments to sit on site alongside that, which means that although people will be able to deliver it, there will be a delay before you will be able to actually register learners for assessment in that area. Okay, so that brings me to the end of my my summary overview. As I said, in one way, it's a period of great change and there's a lot going on. In another way, we're still waiting on a lot of things to be agreed and finalised. There's a limit to what I can say at this particular time.